Hello lovely people, my name is Emma and today I'm doing another one of my 360 book reviews where I talk about a book for 360 seconds or less and hope to give you a full 360 view. Today we are talking about the classic, The Beetle by Richard Marsh, which is really questioning the definition of a classic, because if it's just a popular well-known book from history, this does not tick that box because no one's heard of it, which is one of the biggest crimes of history ever. Maybe. So, The Beetle by Richard Marsh was published in the same year as Dracula, and at the time was actually outselling Dracula, as it boldly states on its blurb. It really wants you to know that, and I can totally see why. If you are a fan of Dracula or any of the gothic novel movements, you definitely should not be sleeping on this book. It is essentially the same storyline as Dracula, but instead is playing around with some of kind of the Egyptian mythology out there, and instead, rather than it being a vampire, the creature that we meet is the Beetle, which is kind of a weird shape-shifting scarab beetle-esque type character. Unlike Dracula, we don't really get to know a crazy amount about the Beetle as a character in themselves. There's no like meeting them as if in like a normal human context and then them having something shifty and shady going on, unlike with Dracula. But instead, because of that, I think it works in a stronger context to create more suspense and real horror in there, because it is this sort of phantom creature that we really lacks a lot of the humanity that I think Dracula shows early on in the book, that really removes some of the teeth from him, for me personally as a reading experience. When I say it's similar to Dracula, I really do mean it is following a very similar formula in terms of the meeting some kind of freaky creature and then there being a damsel in distress and a group of people having to band together to try and take down the big bad at the end. But unlike Dracula, both in terms of because of its length, but also I feel like its writing style, I felt that this was more approachable. Now don't get me wrong, I did really enjoy Dracula as a read. I feel like this review is inadvertently turning into like a let's just dump on Dracula as a book, which I do think it is such a strong story, but in my personal opinion, The Beetle is just better. It's doing a lot of the same things, but it is doing it in a far more approachable way for particularly a modern reader today. So things like just the kind of amount of so a lot of classics books rely on things like epistolary novel style, where there's lots of like diary entries and writing, and this one doesn't. It just takes you along with the action straight away. There's none of this like accounting it to some phantom reader. Instead, you're just in there with them, and I really appreciated that. Also, it just has a higher percentage of dialogue, or at least it felt like that in the reading, and I found that just kept the pace moving a lot quicker. There was a lot less like giant chunks of text and a lot more just like things happening actually, and we were really moving forward, which I really appreciated. It's also just like really creepy and scary and terrifying. I don't know if it's because Dracula is now such a like established part of our pop culture that it's difficult reading a book like that to really get into it, because you obviously know all the tropes, and this one is very different because it's not known, and whether that's kind of the reason why my reading experience was so different with them. But I just found that this one was such a like strong horror book that if you are a fan of like modern day horror, you definitely should not be sleeping on this book. It is fantastic. I think if you are someone who is trying to get into classics and doesn't know where to start, this one might be a good place to go for, because you're not going to know a whole ton about it and then be coming into it with a lot of like preconceived ideas, unlike again a lot of classics. And I just think writing wise, it is genuinely just more accessible than a lot of the classics books out there, which is really bizarre. And I don't know, I'd love to be able to like get a time machine and go back and see what people's reading experiences were like when it was first published, because it does seem to buck some of the standard trends of writing from that time period. But this is coming from my super limited, definitely not backed up by any academics, kind of knowledge of that, just from my own reading experiences, hasten to add. The kind of main characters as such, I don't really want to go into too much detail about, because I don't want to spoil anything in particular, and like I said, it is following a relatively standard formulaic way of understanding these books, shall we say, but I found that the ending was very satisfying, and I thought that it just generally did a good job the whole way through. When I say it does Egyptian mythology, it very loosely touches on it, so it's not going into any crazy detail there, and I think actually in some ways that's probably a good thing, where because it isn't going to super detail, it doesn't run the risk of getting too much wrong. There's some vague allusions to a particular cult of, I think, Osiris or Iris or somebody like that, and other than that it really kind of leaves a lot of the Egyptian mythology alone, and kind of builds its own mythology onto it, so it's not running the risk of getting anything crazily too historically inaccurate in there, which I think was a very sensible move by Richard Marsh. So I definitely would recommend this for a whole ton of different readers, and like I've said in a few videos in the past, I want to go into the parallel universe where this became popular instead of Dracula, because I want someone to rewrite Twilight with Beetle Boy. I think that would be amazing. So any scriptwriters out there, please get on that. I want that. If 50 Shades of Grey can get big and it's essentially fan fiction, I want you to write a new version of Twilight with Beetles instead. That's all I want for Christmas. So that's pretty much it from me. Have a wonderful reading week, and I will chat to you soon. Bye!